Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of Craft Authors in Conversation. I'm Denise Kiernan, and my guest this week is the super fantastic Kate Andersen Brower. Hello, Kate.
Hello, Denise.
Thank you for being here. It's so nice to have you. Thanks everybody for coming. Before we get started, I'm going to give you a little tour of what's going on here. So as you can see here on the left-hand side of my left, your right-hand side of your screen, there's the chat. Feel free to, share ideas, put up links. We might mention things that come up during the conversation that we want to look into further. If something is going wrong, like this crashes down behind me, or I spill wine all over the place or something, I will communicate via the chat, or someone else will, to get us back on the screen. So far that hasn't happened. There's always a first. Also down below at the bottom, you can see ask a question. And if you click there, that is where you can put your questions. So you do not have to put them in the chat. You can just put them right in the ask a question section. There's also a poll there. Don't feel like you have to answer it, but it's just, basically asking you guys to, think about how you would like to see craft live stream, things like that. So that is a general overview of what's going on. I'm just starting I'm actually starting the simulcast over on Facebook right now. That's a new thing we're doing this week. I would like to say, you can also, there is a button right down there below Kate and I's head that say order signed books by Kate and Denise. How are they offering signed books, you might wonder? Well, our Malaprops, our lovely indie bookstore sponsor for Craft, and our partners in this, unofficial partners, but we love them. If you order from that link, that will take you straight to a page with Kate and I's books. And Malaprops will take your order, and Kate will send in book plates. So signed book plates, you can get autographed books, which is a wonderful thing that you can do, and that you can't do on many other sites where you order books, but you can do it right here. So we thank Malaprops for that. We also always want to say we miss Little Jumbo. Normally we would be having craft at the lovely Little Jumbo cocktail bar, but we can't. We will again soon sometime, but the mixologist and co-owner Shawl Gray has once again created a craft cocktail in honor of our guest, Kate, and I will be sharing that later. But for now, cheers. Cheers, Kate. Thank you for coming.
Cheers.
And it's so good to see you.
I love that.
And so please line up your questions. We're going to talk for a little while. It's hard to know where to start with you, actually, because there was a part of me that just thought, just let everybody ask questions for an hour. One of the things that I've always found interesting is that you actually, you've worked for Bloomberg, you've worked for CBS, Fox, you're still a contributor to CNN. And then on the other hand, you do these longer form works, these books. So what is that, as somebody who is a storyteller, right? A writer, but also someone who tells stories for television? What is that? How do you switch gears for that? Like, what is that like for you?
Well, we were talking earlier about CNN, and they have this great First Lady series that's coming out. And it's very different in sort of so they have a different First Lady for each hour. And I was a consultant on it, and it starts this Sunday with Michelle Obama. It's amazing because they just do such a good job of getting into the struggles that she faced and how she was judged differently as the first African-American First Lady. There's a great scene in it where they have a woman playing Michelle Obama, but you can see her watching herself during the campaign, and she's being criticized. And it's all about the idea that she had to kind of hold back how she was feeling and thinking so she wouldn't be seen as this angry Black woman, which was what some people were saying about her completely unfairly, right? So anyway, to condense her 8 years as First Lady into an hour and a half, I was watching it and I was emailing with the producers like, well, what about her? We should have more on the Let's Move initiative. We should have more on this and that. And they're like, we just don't have the time for that. So we
Yeah.
have to do the punchy. So it's really about the punchiest things and getting the story as accurate as possible, but also keeping people engaged. Like, you're not going to have a whole hour and a half on her military family work, which is really fascinating, but it's not going to necessarily hold people. I mean, people like controversy, right? They want
Yeah.
a little something. So, you know, that it's very different medium. But when I was at Fox, like, I was there during the War on Terror, and we called it, and I had a booklet that was about like 100 pages long of different generals to call at any moment. I mean, I was a booker. I was in my early 20s, and everything was just kind of this very stark us versus them, you know, and you would have book somebody for like 3 minutes was a long segment. So you never, that's what I love about writing long form, and I'm sure you agree. It's like you actually get to get into some topics.
Yeah, you can't go down every rabbit hole, but you can actually go, you have more than 3 minutes in the rabbit hole, at least. And you've done, I mean, you have really, so your most recent, just in case, you know, for those who haven't had the wonderful opportunity to read all your books, you've really focused not just on Washington, but on the White House.
Mm-hmm.
You've done The Residence, which I love. I mean, I like them all, but The Residence for me is, I love getting behind the scenes and seeing the people who work in a place that you're kind of fascinated with.
That's my favorite book too, by the way.
Is it really? No.
Is your first book your favorite book?
You know, it's like, I don't have children, you do, but you're not supposed to say which one is your favorite, I guess. I don't know. I do have because I knew all the women, there were smaller books before Girls of Atomic City, so it's hard to call it my first book, but it's definitely my first big book.
Yeah.
And because I knew so many of the people in there, I think it will always be a very, very special book to me. So The Residence, The First Ladies, First in Line, and now this latest one, Team of Five, The President's Club in the Age of Trump. So you have really, I mean, made the White House, its residents, its staff, the Oval Office, like, that has been your focus. Is that something that kind of evolved organically, or were you a kid who was, you know, obsessed with the presidency and first ladies? So, like, do you sort of remember when you thought, I'm going to start actually go from doing television to doing these longer form pieces on this?
Yeah, I mean, it really came about because I was a reporter at Bloomberg, and so this was during Obama, like the beginning of Obama, and they didn't have enough people to cover the briefings. And so I wanted to be a print reporter. And I said to my boss, like, I'll go and sit in the pool van. And this was actually at the end of Bush 43, so the tail end of Bush, while he plays golf or runs or whatever he does. They just needed bodies, you know, and they call it, like, you know, body. You're basically making sure he doesn't drop dead, right? So because you need to call your desk and tell them. And literally, we would just sit at Army bases around DC and go to the Starbucks, and it was like kind of mindless. But it was getting to be in the motorcade, and it was being there in case something happens. And so then so in other words, I was a political science major at Barnard. And then I went to Oxford and I got a master's in history, modern history. But it was not like, I was not one of those kids that could name every president, you know, from George Washington on. That wasn't, I really liked the human side of it. Yeah. And that's why I wrote The Residence, was this kind of, you know, it was Michelle Obama and seeing the way she interacted with the staff. And seeing the struggles of being the first Black first lady, and what, you know, this role of the first lady is so undefined and nebulous and really anachronistic. I mean, the idea that, you know, if Jill Biden becomes first lady, I'm writing something for CNN now about how she'd be the first lady to keep her day job. Like, how shocking is that to us, that that's like an amazing thing? Yeah. And so, you know, I'm a feminist, and I feel very strongly about how women's roles and contributions are overlooked in many ways. And I think it goes for first ladies too. So that's how I got kind of, and then into the resident staff and kind of the Downton Abbey of it all at the White House.
Yeah, it is. It is very much like the residence is very much like it is the upstairs, downstairs of the White House.
Totally.
And but the great thing about that, going to the staff and the people who work there and the butlers and the maids and the cooks and all that, is that it makes the whole thing feel so much more accessible. You feel less like you're on the outside looking in. You kind of feel like you're on the inside. Say again?
That was the hope. And
Yeah, no, done, did it. When you, oh, and great. So over here in the chat, you'll see we have some links up about Kate, and also we're going to put some links up about, what was the name of the First Ladies on CNN?
First Women. The first, it's actually called First Ladies.
It's called First Ladies, okay.
And Robin Wright is narrating it, which is really awesome.
Fantastic, okay. Yay.
And they picked a kind of interesting group of first ladies. They do Michelle Obama, Nancy Reagan, Lady Bird Johnson. They did a huge Bush series, so they don't do Laura Bush and Barbara Bush because they've already kind of covered that. They did not do Rosalind Carter, who is a personal favorite of mine because I talked to her, and I think she is the first lady to like professionalize the role. She was the first one who would go into her office every day in the East Wing. And that means something.
Sure, it absolutely does. And that's actually kind of a nice segue into Team of Five. And I really, I felt actually as though the residents and Team of Five kind of sort of overlapped in a really interesting way and kind of intersected nicely, because you did talk to so many people who worked around these presidents and ex-presidents to form a picture of who they are in their, you know, the presidential afterlife. So can you just explain so it's the President's Club in the Age of Trump. What is the President's Club?
So there was a great book, Nancy Gibbs and Michael Duffy wrote it, called The President's Club years ago, about this group of living former presidents and how they, well, not so much react to the sitting president. That's more my book because Trump is such an outlier. But, you know, the relationships that they form, how they deal with going from being the most powerful person in the world to being semi-retired essentially. And like going back in history, you look at someone like Harry Truman, he was wandering around Independence, you know, people could just run up to him and ask him questions. I mean, it was incredible. But now you have, you know, since Bush 41, you have like gated communities where they live, and you have Secret Service protection, which we've had for a long time for former presidents and first ladies. And just kind of I was interested in doing this book because of Trump, because I wanted to know, you know, one of my earliest calls for the book was to an Obama advisor, and he said, this sounds like a really good book, like for fiction. You know, this idea that you have in your head that you're all like, you know, somehow texting each other and meeting for lunch, and this is they are friends in the way that Washington people are friends, right? They're not all calling each other up and saying, can you believe what Trump did today? I mean, they're in their own worlds and they're surrounded by all these people. And Still, especially Obama. He is very like protected and also I think they're also very careful, because when I would talk to people around Obama, it was, you know, the idea was we don't really want to talk on the record because anything, and he doesn't want to talk on the record because anything he says is basically just kind of galvanizing Trump's base. You know, there's no point for him to criticize Trump. And he holds back a lot, except recently, I think we've seen a lot more from him.
Did you see you can text him now? Did you see that? Yeah. You're going to get a lot of contact.
Right.
You know, so, I mean, you're talking about all of these. Do you have any idea how many? I hate when people ask me this question, so I'm going to ask you. Do you have any idea how many people you interviewed? I mean, there are a lot. There's a lot of information in that book. Do you have?
Probably more than probably like 150 around, maybe. And you know, I'm trying to think of like the best sometimes the best people to interview, are people who aren't politicians, because they're less worried about what they're saying and whether or not they're going to offend somebody. I find the higher up you go, the more tight-lipped people get, except for Trump, who I interviewed, who is not tight-lipped at all. And it's so funny because when I came back from that interview, my husband said, "So what did you get from him? Like, what did he say that was surprising?" And I said, "Nothing," he says. It's the only thing that would have been surprising is if I went in there and he said, "You know what? I want to apologize to all these former presidents who I have mistreated. Like, I feel really badly about how I've spoken about them," which is obviously not at all what he said. So everything's on the surface with him. So it's not as interesting an interview, actually.
You also talk to a lot, like I said, you talk to a lot of people who worked around these folks. Do you, from a process standpoint, you have to actually first manage to get all the interviews, which is no small feat, right? You got to get in the door and arrange them. Then you've got to do the interviews. Then you have all of this information that you have to corral. And then at some point you have to write. Are you one of those people who sort of has a system you follow when you're doing a book, or does it change depending on the subject matter?
I mean, my system is to have a giant Word document where the most interesting interviews and quotes that I have transcribed and gotten research that I like, I put asterisks by, which is ridiculous because then you search through all the asterisks and you have all this just sort of
everything gets an asterisk. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's how I do it. I would love to know, do you have a system? Because maybe I can get one from you.
This screen is here to hide my system. It's hiding the system.
Okay. It's not a pretty sight.
No, the only thing I always do is I start very, very wide. Like the net's very wide at first, because you never know what you're going to find, who you're going to talk to, who's going to lead you to something else. And I do always start with an outline, even before I've done interviews, before I've done research. And the outline might go right out the window, but I've got to have some sort of roadmap in place before I start.
And do you transcribe your own interviews? Because I do. I think it's important to do it because I'm kind of not there when I'm doing. You want to be present for the interview, and I take notes by hand and I record them, and often I will video them too. So there might be 3 different levels of what's going on. And writing the reporter's notebook is just a habit from starting out in journalism a million years ago. But to me, it's interesting to have that filter while I'm doing an interview because. And they're starting to do more research about this since everybody just types on a computer now. Your brain is kind of already thinking about what you think is important. So it's amazing how I can have everything recorded, but the stuff that I write down in the reporter's notebook while I'm talking to someone is often like the most important stuff from the interview, because that's what you want to make sure to write down. But then when you go back and you listen again, I do find that helpful. So yeah, I do. I know people who use transcription services. I can't do it. I don't either, but it's time consuming. It's
my God,
time consuming. I mean, hours of sitting and listening to someone talk, and then you're trying to thank God there's a fast forward button on some of the digital recorders.
Oh my God, I know. Oh no, the digital stuff has made it so much easier. A fun part of research, I know I like this as well. Is photography, because it can be such whether or not the pictures make it into the book or they end up on the website or you use them in a presentation, pictures help tell a really interesting story. And you have some great pictures from a team of 5. So I'm going to try and decide which one I want to show first. And there's so many great ones. You know what? This is probably my absolute favorite. This picture, did that show up? Can everybody see that? If you can't, type it into the chat if you can't see it. So talk about, I love the look on Michelle Obama's face and on HW's face. Can you just talk about this for a second?
Yeah, I mean, so they are genuinely friends. I mean, they don't talk all the time, but they get along. And because of the way presidents and first ladies are seated according to protocol, the current first lady is going to be sitting next to the former president. So it was just at these events that they would find themselves sitting next to each other all the time. And then there's the famous sharing of the mints. And I talked to people who work for Bush who said, look, it's genuine, but it's also done knowing that we're trying to send a message, especially now. This was taken before Trump was elected, but the idea is that it's at the African American National History Museum in DC, which is a really amazing museum.
Yeah.
And I think that they do this on purpose, and both of them, they want to show, like, you can be friends with somebody who is from the other party and somebody who's so different from you. And it's just very starkly different to what we see today. And I think that one of the things that Trump said that I just really, I don't know if he was lying or what, but when he said he thinks he could be friends with Bill Clinton one day, that they could like golf and hang out. And you just think, like, words do matter, and what you've said and done, it has repercussions, right? So the idea that this is all a stage and they're all just kind of playing a role, I think that's what Trump thinks. I think some of the other presidents and first ladies have a little more genuine kind of humanity to them. I think all of them do, really, Republican, Democrat. I just don't think it's partisan at all.
They do all seem to take looking at the book, their post presidency, they all have their different projects. And it really was, as you said, Rosalind Carter, she championed mental health, which is still a huge issue, in this country.
It's Rosalind, and so I called her Rosalind for a while.
Is it Rosalind?
Yes, but nobody knows that, and she hates it because she's like, I was first lady and everybody mispronounces my name. So I mispronounced her name. And
like the first time you met her?
So I was talking, so it wasn't to her face, but to David Kennerly, who was the Ford's photographer. And I said, so what about Rosalind Carter? And he was like, oh my God, Rosalind's a place in suburban Washington. If you say that in her presence, there's no way she'll ever talk to you. And it's like, can you imagine? Like, people are constantly mispronouncing her name. And so I think she feels so disrespected over her, and I think that goes to the one-term president thing. Like, but anyway, I'm not saying that to like admonish you. I'm saying I did it too.
Oh no, I know. I've spoken at the Carter Center twice.
Oh no.
I've sadly, because I've always wanted to meet there, and both times it was like, we're hoping, we're hoping, the president will be able to come, he's, this, that, and the other thing. And I haven't met him yet. But thank God so now I actually do get, if I get to go back again, or if they don't see this and realize I've never known how to. But it's a good way to stay humble, isn't it?
Yeah.
You were very lucky that you.
No, I mean, it's just, but that's the thing about her, is that she feels so disrespected by the other first lady.
I think that is by the other. Yeah.
So Michelle Obama had a mental health commission.
Right.
For a time, and Rosalind wasn't invited to it, and it was like this big kerfuffle where the Carter Center was involved, and advisors were calling up Obama advisors and saying, she was the one who spearheaded this program in the 70s, and she's the one that really brought mental health really to the forefront. The fact that it wasn't this, she wanted people to be treated, their mental health issues to be treated the same way any of your physical health problems are treated. And this is something we still talk about today. It was like she was so ahead of her time in that way. And yet they just forgot her. I mean, they said they forgot. And it's like, how do you forget? And I think that she's always felt overlooked. I don't feel badly for her, but I think she still feels so angry that he lost, and it's still very bitter. And I
Yeah.
talked to her about it, and it's still all these years later a sore spot, even though he's seen as the most successful former president
Oh,
in history,
oh
right?
yeah. Oh yeah.
But still, she feels like that kind of, but that's what makes her so human, that she feels like insecure about herself and it's on the surface. I like that about her.
Oh yeah, that's what's great. That's what's great about Rosalind and all the other people in the book, is that you actually do get to see these sides of them that you definitely don't usually get to see during the presidency, and often you don't get to see after the presidency. And I think the fact that you talked to so many people who worked around them and with them, that really helped fill in the picture. This is another one that I love.
Yes.
Tell me about this picture.
That's Barbara Bush's funeral.
Okay.
And the Bill Clinton and George Bush 43 relationship is really sweet and genuine. And Bill Clinton, never met his biological father, who died in a car accident before he was born. His stepfather, he had a terrible relationship with. So this is like a real friendship, and it's been well documented. I think one of the best stories in the book, because it hasn't been well documented, is the friendship between Obama and Bush 41. That before Bush died, 3 days before he died, Obama went down to Houston and met with him. So the last president to see Bush before he passed was Obama and not his son. And I asked Bush's spokesman, why would he not have gone down there, to see his father? And he said, he had said goodbye so many times before.
Yeah.
He just didn't think it was necessarily going to happen. And so it was, it's something you'd never see today, like this, right?
Totally. And it's interesting in the, I think it was in the book, I think it was Ari Fleischer who said, isn't it nice to have an island of people, island of people who I'm sorry, I'm not
yeah,
quoting.
right. It is Ari Fleischer. And he said something like, isn't it nice, like you said, to have an island of people who actually behave and and are kind to each other. And I mean, this is a bit, and not to sound kind of Pollyanna-ish, right? But there is sort of this sense of mutual respect, and you can disagree without being disagreeable, and all of that has definitely gone out the window if you look at the Ruth Bader Ginsburg, what's going on today, right? We've gotten to this place where things are so different than they used to be. And I think it's important to remember, if Biden is elected, I think there is a chance of going back to that. I interviewed Biden a few times, and for my VP book, he said, he talks to Mike Pence. Now, this was back then.
Right.
Obviously, they're not talking now. But this sense that he will talk to people. The first year Trump was in office, he was regularly talking to somebody who is so different from him in every way, right? But he felt that he needed that lifeline to the White House. He needed to have somebody he could communicate with. And Pence said it was like a person you could talk to, even though he disagreed with them.
When you talk about getting these interviews and discussions that need to happen so that books like this can happen, these are incredibly divisive times. How do you're talking to Democrats, you're talking to Republicans, you're talking to conservatives, you're talking to liberals, you're talking to people active in the government, people who used to be in the government, people who want to talk, people who don't want to talk. How do you, in this climate, how do you put yourself out there as somebody who needs to get information? And no matter how you feel about anyone you're talking to, not immediately widening any existing divide or making that divide really well. I mean, how do you not polarize the situation so that you can actually just sit down and have a conversation and get the information that you need?
Yeah. I mean, I think there were some times when I really wanted to, and I'm sure you've experienced this too, bang my head against the wall. It was just so deeply frustrating. And then there were other times when things would really, come through that you wouldn't expect to come through. And you also don't want to pander too much. So you don't want to go to like Obama's people and say, I love Obama and I voted for him and blah, blah. It's like, that's wrong. And you
Yeah.
want to kind of be very middle of the road about it. And then with Trump, I did say, and this is absolutely true, and I think it probably helped a lot, is that because I didn't know Sarah Sanders at all. And I said, I wrote this book, The Residence, and I know there's a butler named Buddy Carter who's worked on the second floor of the White House since the Clintons, and he really likes President Trump. Like, he has a really good relationship with him, and that's absolutely true.
Mm-hmm.
And Trump was just like, he's so desperate for anything positive like that. So it's a fine line between feeling like you're sucking up to somebody to get what you want, right?
Yeah.
And that's why I think writing these political books now is just like, it's just so hard because of Trump.
But it's also, coming out of journalism, there's also a real problem right now with this, with the access journalism. We're going golfing and going to parties with people you're supposed to be covering objectively. And that I think is a very worrying trend as well.
Oh yeah. That's why, look, if you're going to be honest about it, a lot of journalists are Democrats, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Absolutely true. And so I think that the Bushes in particular are kind of sometimes easier to deal with because I don't think they felt that people were necessarily in their corner. If you feel like the world is, at your feet and you can do whatever you want, you don't have to answer someone's phone call or return their email.
Right.
Because you can just tweet yourself or tell the New York Times, right?
Sure.
So I think that one thing as a reporter at Bloomberg that I noticed a lot that's, very frustrating, and it's not a partisan thing because the Obamas did it a lot too, is these kind of off the record quotes all the time, and, never being able to attribute things, and then off the record briefings and all this. It's just like, people are so skittish, and I think it's damaging to journalism because, you do have to point to your sources occasionally, right?
Yeah, of course. Ideally, yeah, that's what you're supposed to do. You mentioned one of the butlers, and I want to make sure we leave time for questions and also get a look at your book that's not out yet.
Yeah.
But I do want to some of the stories in both The Residence and in this and in Team of Five about the people who work in the White House. Here's one, so like people like James Ramsey and Eugene Allen. And so here's a picture of this. I believe this is James Ramsey, I believe. Yes.
He is great. He passed away. A lot of the reporting I did for The Residence happened in 2013, 2014. And it was just luck that I was able to talk to people. He had cancer at the time that I was talking to him. He was, I went to his apartment in DC, and he was doing all these kind of herbal remedies and everything. And he was really not doing well, but he was very, I remember distinctly, he had a bunch of candy on his counter, and he was like, here, you want some candy? He was a very upbeat, happy person, even though he was in a lot of pain. And he never really, he died shortly after, one of our conversations, and I had no idea how bad it was. And I'm sure you found that with people that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then when they pass away, it's like a relative died. You just feel so wait, how is that possible? And there were a lot of butlers that passed away, and they were very, just very humble. His apartment was very kind of, bachelor pad. He had gotten recently divorced, and on his walls, he had pictures with the Pope and every president, and it was just amazing. And so he didn't really think he was that special, and he was. And they never write their own books because they have so much loyalty to this institution.
You mentioned that in The Residence. You mentioned in Team of Five too, how a lot of them are very they don't want, they see a whole different side of all of these people, and they don't want to necessarily speak it. A lot of them, they have a very non-political relationship with all of these folks, you know?
If I could interview anyone in the world, it would be Buddy Carter, but I'd have to get him like liquored up or something so he could tell me some stuff, because he's seen everything and he loves all of them. Now,
Yeah.
I'm sure that he has seen things in this White House, especially, that would be shocking and you would want to know. But he just won't. And like, there was concern at the beginning, and I don't know if you ever found this. It's a different type of interview maybe than you've done, but a lot of them were worried they'd lose their pensions if they talked on the record.
I encountered people who were trying to get compensation from the government for developing certain kinds of cancers because of what they've been exposed to during the Manhattan Project or during the nuclear when nuclear testing was, running rampant and all that sort of stuff. And they were sometimes very, even though nothing I did would have a bearing on that at all, they wanted to be or they were like, I'm not supposed to talk about the Manhattan Project. I'm like, it was 70 years ago. And how am I going to talk about it? So there is this sort of loyalty that for people who have a job, I think that really impacts their entire lifestyle. Now, this is Eugene Allen, who's also very, very fascinating. I saw pictures of him walking John F. Kennedy Jr. and Caroline at a birthday party. I mean, these people have seen many administrations.
Yeah, and The Butler, the movie, is based on his life. He had passed away by the time I was working on this book, but I talked to his son, Charles, who told me that, his father was, if you've seen The Butler, they portray his mother as like an alcoholic. Oprah plays his mother.
Yeah.
And Charles Allen is like, my mother was so sweet, so boring. No one would have watched a movie about my parents. Like, they just weren't. And yet, so they dramatize their lives, which I just think is really interesting too, how Hollywood can do that.
Sure.
And especially if you're like actually playing a real person and then making them worse than they were or more flawed than they were. He, I don't think, minded that much. His parents had both passed away. It was a way to get his father's story out. But I just thought it was really interesting. Like, how would you feel as a son?
Sure.
To have your mother portrayed that way. But yeah, I mean, he was close with, Eugene Allen was very close with the Kennedys and with Nancy Reagan. I mean, that's the thing. They span history in such a way that they see everything. I mean, to think that Buddy Carter, who's there now. And so if you have the head butler like Eugene Allen is the person who sees everything, because they're on the second floor of the White House and they're the closest to the family. You have florists and chefs and housekeepers. Housekeepers see a lot too, but it's really the butlers who get that one-on-one, very close bond with the first ladies, especially. The presidents are, busy doing their presidential things. But the first lady is like in the residence, and she's running it. And they call it, if something decision comes from the second floor, it's from the first lady. She is the person. It was funny. I interviewed an engineer who worked there when Trump was first in office. And he said he got a phone call on inauguration night. And it was from.
I love this. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it was from the first lady saying, my bedroom's too cold. And then a few minutes later, they get a call from the president saying, my bedroom's too warm. And that's like, something clicks in their mind. Oh my God, they're not sleeping in the same room, Right. So they see, little things like that. It speaks a lot.
She was in Michelle Obama's mother's.
Yes, for a while. Yes. On the third floor, which is very far away. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So now we're talking about the building itself, and this is what's so fun about, so you have a book that's going to be coming out for kids. It's not out yet, so we get to show it. Yes, there's the cover, and I'm going to pull up.
It's called Exploring the White House Inside America's Most Famous Home. It's a middle grade book, so it's for 8 to 12-year-olds, and it comes out December 8th. And it's really a combination of the residents and first women with some new chapters. Like there's a chapter on White House ghosts, on White House pets, on, lions and tigers and bears. Oh my, pets in the White House. Like, kind of making it accessible for kids and interesting and not part
And
of.
there are ghosts, right? Aren't there ghosts?
Yeah, the ghosts I love. The Lincoln bedroom's haunted, as everyone knows, right? I did interview a maid who said that she saw Lincoln several times, just sitting with a pipe and his top hat and not saying anything. And I was like, "Are you serious, Mary?" She's like, "Absolutely, several times." And she's a completely quiet, together person. So there are people, and Nancy Reagan absolutely believes there were ghosts. But she believed in the supernatural, as we know.
For sure. Yeah.
But it's it was an interesting book to work on, because we're at a time where people are we have the Black Lives Matter movement, and like this, I think, renewed interest in paying attention to the fact that slaves built the White House, right? And there's so I have a chapter in there on race in the residence, and
Oh, that's great.
yeah. So
okay, when can we get this book again? And I'll be sure when I send out the debrief, I'll put in a link for that as well.
It's December 8th.
December 8th. Okay. So I want to leave time for questions. I could talk to you about all sorts of stuff. Before questions, though, it is time for the Kate Andersen Brower Craft Cocktail of the Week, brought to you by Shawl Gray and Little Jumbo. And here it is. It is a twist on a 1920s classic cocktail, El Presidente.
I like that.
So here you go. So these cocktail cards will live on my website, and I will of course send you a copy, Kate. And
I expect the actual cocktail tour. We talked about this.
Yes, at some point you will come here, and we will get to actually go to Little Jumbo and we will drink El Presidentes. So all right, let's check out some questions. I love this one. Have you seen the film Guarding Tess, about a secret? You know the film Guarding Tess? I think it was Nicolas Cage, right?
No.
Jessica Tandy.
Oh yeah, that does ring a bell. Yes.
Secret Service guy assigned to guard a former first lady.
Yes.
Did you see
it? Did I like it?
Did you see it?
No, but I know what it is. I did not. Okay. That's a really good question.
Did you ever encounter any sort of anybody who was guarding first ladies specifically, as opposed to the presidents themselves, or the ex-presidents themselves?
No, that's also a really good question. When I would talk to Secret Service, it was really about the presidents. I didn't interview Secret Service for the First Lady's book. So no, but those are great questions, and how different that is, right?
Oh, totally. Absolutely. That's a very different, yeah. You'll have to watch it now.
Yes.
Okay, we have a question about haunting the Lincoln bedroom. I think did she say the woman who said she saw Lincoln's ghost, was it in the Lincoln bedroom or was it somewhere else?
She said it was in a hallway outside the Lincoln bedroom. So there's like a big center hall in the White House, and it leads to, you go by if you walked out of the Lincoln bedroom, he would be sitting right there. But there are lots and lots of ghost stories that I have in the children's book in particular that are beyond Lincoln. I mean, many people have said they've seen most presidents in some form, but Lincoln is the most common. And I think the Lincoln bedroom is the most common place where they've seen ghosts.
All right. Okay. Who is the most intimidating person you ever interviewed, and who is the least?
Dick Cheney was someone I thought who would be very intimidating. And I know that you probably are not a huge fan, but he was amazingly engaged. I mean, we talked for a couple hours in his library, and he lives outside of DC, and there was construction going on at the house next door. And he was like, God damn it, it's so loud. It's so annoying. It was funny to me because, he has this kind of, Darth Vader reputation, right? That you think he'd be so awful. But he was really engaged. He worked for Ford. So he loves, obviously, he doesn't love talking about, Guantanamo. I mean, he does probably like talking about Iraq, but I didn't ask him about it. Like we were talking about stuff that happened in the 70s and 80s, which is a much more comfortable place for him to be, because I was interested in vice presidents, and that's what we were talking about. And then I was talking to him about, of course, his influence on Bush, and we did get into Iraq a little bit, but it wasn't like I was coming at it from a real activist perspective. I was a historical, look at it. And so, I mean, he was much more personally easier to talk to, and I never thought he would be. And I think, I think Al Gore was more intimidating than I thought he would be.
Really?
Yes, because, okay, so in that case, we were on the phone, which I think you will say this makes a big difference.
Yeah, huge.
So I asked him a question about Hillary Clinton and what it was like working in a White House with such an influential first lady, that you were essentially like having to, there was kind of a controversy there, and what he wanted to do versus what she wanted to do, and what she wanted to do always really took precedent, right? Because she's the wife. And so he said, and it was very early in our conversation, which I should not have done at the beginning of the conversation. He said, I think our conversation's almost over. He was really
That's always, you always love to hear that. Yeah.
And I mean, there's a warning for anybody who wants to get into journalism, is that you don't ask a tough question in the beginning.
And I think I remember being younger and thinking like that was the way to go, so that you show that you're, you're not going to be some kind of pushover. It's like, no, don't. You do it once and then you're like, yeah, I'm never doing that again.
Yeah. And like, it's also like, I want to rip off the Band-Aid, like, and make sure I want to make sure I ask this question.
Right. Yeah. I can't forget this one.
I can't forget this one. And then it's like, oh, the person, especially a politician, they are just so skilled at like not answering a question anyway.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. So let's see. The role of First Lady is undefined, and every First Lady has her own take on the role. What do you think Melania Trump's take on her role is?
So one funny thing about my interview with Trump was that he said, you write about first ladies, right? Like, why are you talking to me? And I thought, wow, you don't even know why I'm talking to you. That's really scary.
You didn't even know which book you were working on?
Right. Okay. So there's that. Melania Trump is so guarded, and so I think that a lot of liberals, a lot of Democrats want to think that she's like this hostage in the White House. I think that's been dispelled, right? I mean, she is very much on board with him. She's very tough. She's not some damsel in distress. And that is, I think people, and I don't know if it was sympathetic or kind of sentiment that people thought she was trying to escape, Yeah. He's a birther too, by the way. I mean, she comes out and, she's trained at his knee, right? She's learned from him how to fight back, and she's a fighter, and she's tough. She's sued journalists before. I mean, I didn't want to write a biography of her because I was worried about it, and thankfully a lot of other great reporters have, but I was just, and I think that's so dangerous, right? That you're frightened of what might happen if you say something that upsets them.
Right. That's really interesting. You said that when you first interviewed Trump, he wasn't immediately sort of aware of what it was that you were doing the book on. Did he know? Did you have to explain to him? Did you have to did you tell him what the President's Club is? And
Yes. So one of the questions I asked, right. And it's not a particularly highfalutin topic, but
Sure.
It's a little bit, you have to think for a second of what you're talking about. So I asked him a question about John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. And I was like, we know that they were famously rivals, and became friends later on in life, and there are all these great letters, and a lot of people know about this. And he was like, oh, interesting, yes, whereas someone like Obama, or probably even Bush, but definitely Obama, would know all of this, right? I mean, so yeah, there was some kind of sense that I had to explain. And then also in Bob Woodward's book, he talks about this in a lot of detail, and he also got to see the cables, which is better. But Trump had these cables from Kim Jong-un, and he brought them out, and he said, you're not supposed to see this, but these are top secret memos from the leader of North Korea in North Korean, but here's the English translation. And Sarah Sanders was like, oh no. And I said, can I take a photo? And she's like, absolutely not. And you always wonder if it's on purpose, or if it's, and I think it must be, right, on purpose.
I don't know. I mean, maybe. You mean sort of oh, looky. No.
Right.
Yes. Don't you want to see it? Don't you want to see it? Oh, you can't see it. You can't see it.
But that would be smart to be here's evidence. And, whereas if you're just kind of slapdash handing out top secret, classified material to someone you've never met, then that's scary. So I kind of want to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God.
Oh my God.
When you mentioned the President's Club to him, didn't you ask him if you thought that he would fit in? How did that topic come up?
I mean, that was really what I wanted him to. I mean, I think as a reporter, you're always trying to kind of see where you can get something newsy, right? And something different. Yeah. And I was really hoping that he might say something conciliatory or something. I mean, maybe I have rose-colored glasses on here, right? But that he might say, you know what, I think that I have been, treated some of the former presidents unfairly. And he did say about Bush 41 that it was shortly after Bush's funeral. So he was very he was honored that he was invited to the funeral, right? But when I asked him the question of how he would fit in, he basically just laughed and said, how do you think? Which is true. I mean, he will obviously not be fitting in any way. Yeah.
Wow. So what is how obviously a lot of what you do is the President's Club foot starring Daniel Day-Lewis.
I saw that.
Okay. All right. How both you and your husband work. Your husband works full time at CNN, yes, and you're still a contributor. How has the pandemic sort of upended your routines as journalists?
Well, it's nice that my husband's home now. I mean, he's not going into an office. Obviously, it's just such a terrible, awful time that 200,000 people have died, and it's so awful. So it's hard to see any positives coming out of it. But I think that maybe for some people, and I think for us, it's kind of given you a sense of being more present with your family. I think he is still working just as hard. He's just doing it from home. And as as an author, you can work from home all the time, right? A lot.
Yeah.
You're almost desperate to get out, right? I really missed.
Well, yeah. I mean, this is when this first happened, a lot of people would say, well, what's the big deal? You're always working at home. Why is this? How is your life changed?
Your life.
And the thing is, on a certain level, it hasn't. That's true. I do work from home, but I was already so isolated. Yes. That the little bit of, going to Little Depot or, just going out, seeing the people I would always see, at the gym or whatever. Not having that just made things so much different.
Oh, totally.
And I think it's almost, I feel as though some people had, almost kind of like a snow day approach to it at
Yeah.
first. Like, ooh, I'm at home in, underpants at a meeting and no one can see me. And I don't care. I've been doing this for 25 years. I want to get out.
Yes.
And, but it has actually, I found that it is changing where I'm writing in the house. Like I have started to divide the house up differently than I used to, just to create even more, like I'm going somewhere.
Yeah.
In a way that I didn't feel like I had to before because I could go somewhere.
Exactly. I do miss, we have a great coffee shop here called Compass Coffee, and I used to go there all the time, and it was a small thing, but just that, and there are kids, we live near American University, so there'd be college kids there and families. It was like bustling, and this feeling of community, even though I would go there and probably not talk to anybody, right, with my computer.
Yeah.
You felt like you were a part of something. You felt, it's very dangerous for our psyches to be this isolated, and I think the novelty has certainly worn off, but I also, I don't think we know what, at least in DC and Maryland, it's like it's so many mixed messages of what you can do and can't do.
Oh, sure.
Like,
yeah.
I don't, is it like that where you are too?
Oh, well, the CDC, every time I read, it's like, wear a mask, don't wear a mask. It's,
right.
It's in the air, it's not in the air. They've just got to stop.
Yes.
They've got to stop. Every day we play a little game in the morning. It's like, what are they saying today? So yeah, it's very, it's very frustrating. And I actually think the mental health toll, we're going to see that. We still have yet to really see that play out. But what's interesting is now, like normally I wouldn't get to talk to you unless I was in DC or you were down here, but we get to do, I guess that's one of the pluses of all of this is that we get to talk to people from all over the country, see people from all over the country. So silver lining here.
And I think people are reading a lot too.
I think so too. I'm happy to see that these a lot of these independent bookstores are hanging in there. Speaking of which, you may click down here to get a signed book from Kate, or pre-order my book that's coming out in November. And maybe we'll probably have Kate turn the tables on me at some point to interview me. Yes.
I would love
So support your bookstores wherever you are. There are if you don't know where your closest independent bookstore is, you can go to indiebound.org and you can find that out. And it's always good to support your local businesses, especially now. Next week, thank you, Little Jumbo. Thank you, Malaprops. Next week, we have #1 New York Times bestselling, multiple bestsellers, Susan Elizabeth Phillips. Anybody who likes romance novels, Susan Elizabeth Phillips is the be-all, end-all of romance novels. She's also hilarious. She's going to be wonderful. She'll be here, Craft, next Wednesday, 7 o'clock. You can go ahead and sign up and register. It's going to be a fun one. And thank you, Kate. Thanks.
I'm gonna have to tune in for that. I've got.
Oh, you have to. You would. She is. I want to be her. She's awesome. She's great. She's written so many books. I can't even wrap my. Oh my
gosh! And the cocktail could be so much fun for that.
We've already started. Because she gave suggestions. What she wants. Yes, I love it. Yeah. So it's going to be fantastic. So please tune in, everyone. Thanks all of you for doing this. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for stopping by. Thanks for listening to Kate and I chat and providing fantastic questions and all that good stuff. And I hope to see you all next week sometime soon. And I hope to see you too soon, Kate.
Yes, I can't wait to talk.
All right, everybody. Thanks so much. Everybody have a good night.
Good night, guys. Thank you.
Well, bye.
Bye, please.